Game one of the series is officially in the books, and the Hurricanes are up 1-0 after completing the comeback 2-1 in overtime. The big thing that stood out was the Hurricanes stuck to their game, which was one of my keys to this game back on the Tuesday episode. But what else stood out for the Carolina Hurricanes? We'll talk about all that here on a Wednesday edition of Locked on Hurricanes.
You're Locked on Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Locked on Hurricanes, your team every day. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about, Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hawkers, also the co-host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked on Hurricanes. Got a wonderful Wednesday edition of the pod as we get to recap the Hurricanes 2-1 overtime win against the Capitals in game one. Why I think, them sticking to their game was the big factor in this, why they won that game in overtime. Frederik Andersen once again absolutely showed out, picking up his fourth win of the playoffs, and why he has mattered for the Hurricanes, especially in this one. And then we get to hear from Rod Brind'Amour in the postgame following their win. Now, of course, we all know the Hurricanes came back and won game one in overtime. Big thanks to Jaccob Slavin, because the second C stands for clutch. And also, how about Logan Stankoven getting his third goal of the playoffs to tie the game? You love to see it. And the one thing that, like I said, was one of my keys coming into game one was sticking to their game. And that was the point. That was the third point of what the Hurricanes could do in game one. It was stick to their game. The Cowboys are going to come out flying. They're going to come out hitting. They're going to try to be physical and try to drag the Canes into a lot of scrums, a lot of, try and get them into a hitting contest and take them off their game. And the Hurricanes did throw some hits. I mean, it's not like the Hurricanes are complete pushovers the entire time. They still threw, they actually out-hit the Capitals 44-31, which is crazy to think because it didn't seem like the Hurricanes were, throwing that many, but they did out-hit the Capitals for the most part and kind of put the Capitals, basically gave them their game of, the Capitals are usually a team who's going to go be out physical and outdo all the things you need to do, but the Hurricanes actually were the ones that did hit them, which is kind of looking at it's a crazy stat, but also too, they stuck to their game plan of, having the high quality chances, having, shot attempts, basically just forechecking the Capitals over and over and over again and having them in their own zone. And looking at after this game, it's crazy. When you look at the ozone time between both sides, and this includes, going into overtime, the Hurricanes had 33 minutes of 28 seconds of time in the Capitals zone, which is a very long time to have that much time in your opponent's zone throughout an entire game. And the Capitals only had 16:51. So you're looking at the Hurricanes who basically doubled Washington's time of ice in each other's ozones. And that's the kind of the crazy part too, is that's why you saw the shot totals of where it was, where the Hurricanes had 33 shots compared to the Capitals 14. And even more so, the Hurricanes their shots on goal almost passed the Capitals' shot attempts. The Capitals had 34 shot attempts in the entire game, and they only had 14 go on net. For the Hurricanes, how about 94 shot attempts and 33 one on goal? And the thing too is, the Capitals actually blocked 32 shots. So, gotta give credit to the Caps here. They were a team that put their bodies in front of the net and stopped a lot of attempts that Logan Thompson could have seen. And Thompson already saw 33 shots, but the Capitals blocked an extra 32. So you're only talking like 65 shots just in that regard, but the Hurricanes in total had 94. And then if you're looking at the inner slot shots or, the high danger chances, the Hurricanes had 7 compared to the Capitals 6. So you see where the Hurricanes really thrived on their high volume shooting. It's, most of the time you will see mostly hit the crest or hit the pads or hit, part of the goalie. But other than that, though, you definitely saw where the Hurricanes were definitely controlling ozone, controlling puck possession, which is what they're good at. That's what I think frustrates a lot of teams, because you're looking at a Hurricanes team that will forecheck you in your own zone. They will back check really well, control the neutral zone. Basically, it's just 200 feet of putting pressure on their opponents, all grinding them down. And this, I think that's what really helped with the Hurricanes, because, the Capitals did score, in the second period. Protas, gotta give us a credit. It was just, just put the puck in a perfect spot where it just barely gets by Anderson's right leg. It's 1-0. And they were basically holding the Hurricanes. There was like a bend and don't break in the Capitals defense until Logan Stankoven scored in the third period, which kind of tied the game, and then held on, for the most part until Jaccob Slavin won it in overtime. But you got to give credit to Thompson as well. He made a lot of huge saves when his team needed it, and pretty much, had the lead for the most part. And then even after the Hurricanes tied it, was making a lot of big saves until, Slavin won it from the point. But going back to Logan Stankoven's goal, for him, he tied Seth Jarvis and Andrei Svechnikov for the third most goals in a playoff year by a Hurricanes Railers rookie with 3. And that's only behind Eric Cole, who had 6 goals in 2001, and Warren Foegele, who had 5 in 2019. So Logan Stankoven is really putting himself in there for having some huge performances as a rookie, because Seth Jarvis did in 2022 and Andrei Svechnikov in 2019. So Stank has really put himself into a good company of former Hurricanes rookies who really showed out in the playoffs in a, one playoff year in Hurricanes Whalers history. And it's crazy to think that you don't think of Warren Foegele as a big guy who did it for the Hurricanes, but he did back in their 2019 Eastern Conference final run that they had, which kind of shocked everyone, because, that was a ragtag group of Hurricanes guys that, made the playoffs for the first time in a decade. But then, of course, you can think of Eric Cole. He was a good goal scorer for the Canes back in the early 2000s. That's no surprising why he had 6. And then you go back to Jaccob Slavin, you love to see it from Slava, because he's not really a guy who's going to score a lot of goals, but now you give him another point. Here he had 3 points coming into this game. You give him another. And Slavin becomes the 4th defenseman in Hurricanes Whalers history with an overtime goal in the playoffs. He joins, funny enough, Hurricanes assistant coach Tim Gleason, Ian Cole, and Nicholas Volin, who's done it 3 times, to score an overtime goal in the playoffs. So talk about some good company from Slavin when you're talking about Tim Gleason, who's now has been the assistant coach for the Hurricanes for the last few seasons. And you're talking about Nicholas Volin, or the Wall as they call him, with the fact that he's done it 3 times. So even then, talk about just some good things to have, where you're looking at Stankoven joining a lot of the rookies who score 3 goals in the playoffs. Jaccob Slavin joins some good defensemen who have done the thing in the playoffs to win it. But overall, you talk about you want to win on the road, and that's what you really did. The Hurricanes did that. Now they are putting the pressure on the Capitals for game 2, because if the Hurricanes take game 2 on Thursday, now you're going back to Raleigh up 2-0. What you're taking both games in Washington. Now the pressure is even more so on the Caps. If they do win on Thursday, because the last thing the Caps want to do is go into Lenovo Center down 2-0 with the possibility if they lose game 3, now their backs are really against the wall. So I would not be surprised if the Capitals come out flying for game 2, but of course that will be our Thursday game 2 preview episode, so make sure to tune in for that one. But overall, just the way the Hurricanes were able to, fight the whole game, threw a lot of shots on net, did tie in the third, win in overtime. It showed that their willingness to stick to their game really helped the Hurricanes out. Like I said, the depth was really helping out too. 4 lines are all flying and, just outshot the Capitals like crazy, even out hit them too. So it's like all facets of the game really helped out for the Hurricanes to come out and beat the Capitals. Yeah, they went 0 on the power play, but how about the penalty kill? Going 2 for 2 once again, and now they are 17 for 17 so far in the playoffs. But, we talk about, the Canes sticking to their game. What also stood out for the Hurricanes? Well, how about Frederik Andersen doing what Frederik Andersen does? And we will talk more about the Great Dane here in a second on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack a good source of protein with wonderful pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Whether running between meetings or dropping off the kids, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works as hard as you do. So get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. And how about Frederik Andersen? What more can you say about the Great Dane and the fact that he goes out there, sees 14 shots, stops 13 of them? Not a lot of, looking at the fact of just him not seeing a lot of shots, but was able to stay dialed in the whole game. He goes and has a .929 save percentage in the win. And so far in his 5 starts so far in these playoffs, how about the fact that Freddie is 4-1 in those games, and also that he has a .931 save percentage and a .154 goals against. Coming into the game, Andersen led in the goals against average and the save percentage, and then you look at his overall playoff so far. If you look outside of that game 4 where he left early after only seeing 7 shots and having an .857 save percentage, he's had so far in these 5 starts he's had a .958, a .962, a .919, and a .929 save percentage. That is how dialed in Frederik Andersen is, that outside of leaving game 4 early and only having an .857 on 6 of 7 saves, he's had a .900 or better save percentage so far in these playoffs. And that's even including that double overtime loss in game 3 where he had a .919 save percentage, giving up 3 goals on 37 shots. He saved 34 of 37, but every other game, though, game 1, 1 goal. Game 2, 1 goal. Game 5, or game, that 4 was 1 goal. He only gave up 3 in game 3, but then how about game 1 against the Washington Capitals? Another 1 goal. So outside of a double overtime where he gave up 3 goals, every other game for Andersen has been a single goal. He has been absolutely dialed in for the Hurricanes. And I think for the fact of how Andersen's been playing, this is probably his best playoff run so far for the Canes, which is crazy to think because you look back at the 22-23 playoffs where the Hurricanes went to the Eastern Conference Final and unfortunately lost to the Florida Panthers. And that game every game was decided by a goal and, somewhere in overtime, and one was a very late one by Kachuk in game 4. But you look at overall, like I said, he's got a 145 goals against, a .935 save percentage in over 289 minutes of playing. And the fact that you look back at that season where they make the Eastern Conference Finals in the 2023 playoffs, how about a 183 goals against and a .927 save percentage? So his save percentage is already better, and his goals against are also already better. The only other playoffs that you can look at where he was just so dialed in was the 15-16 season, where in the 5 games where he already has a better record now this year, in the 16 playoffs for the Ducks, how about a 3-2 record in 5 starts? And he carried a 141 goals against and a 947 save percentage. Like, that's how close he is to the 15-16 playoffs, where even though he only had 5 starts for the Ducks, he was sensational in those playoffs in 2016. But now you look at 2025, you're looking at 9 playoffs later, and he is so close to beating those playoff numbers. That's how good Freddie Andersen has been in these ones. Yeah, last year's playoffs, he got used quite a bit. And, you kind of look at the goals against and save percentage, not where you really want it to be, but, he did play 10 games for the Hurricanes. But even, like I said, you look back at the 23 playoffs, he played phenomenally well for the Canes in that run that take them to the Eastern Conference Final. But I think right now, this is probably the most dialed in Frederik Andersen's been. It's just the fact that he's been so calm, cool, and collected, keeping the Hurricanes in all these games. And that's why you see them, how they, beat the Devils in game 1 pretty handily. How even though they started slow in game 2, still came out with a comeback and won that game. And even though they lost, game 3, that was double overtime. He kept them in the game the whole time to score 2 goals in the third period to force into overtime. And then nothing much you can say about him getting knocked out of game 4. If he played the whole game, he could have just given 1 goal again. And who knows how that series looked. They still eventually got the win thanks to Pyotr Kochetkov, but who knows what Andersen's numbers could have been then. But then you look at game 1 of round 2, same thing. The Hurricanes were down. He gave up that goal to Protas, but other than that, he was pretty much locked in, stopping the saves they needed to, and the Hurricanes, eventually came back with a Stankoven goal in the third, and then you got Jaccob Slavin winning in overtime. So he kept the Hurricanes in that game. If he gave up another goal, this game's completely different. The narrative and the story is completely different because the Hurricanes needed 2 to win it. If the Capitals are up 2-0 in the third period, what does that look like? Because Thompson was pretty dialed in for the Capitals too, so you got to give the Capital netminder credit for basically seeing all those shots from the Canes and basically keeping them fighting the whole game. But if you're looking at someone who has been consistent so far through these playoffs, it's got to be the Great Dane. Frederik Andersen has been playing so well for the Canes these playoffs, and this is a game that personifies that. Yeah, no matter if he's seeing 37 shots like he did in game 3 against the Devils, or he's seeing 14 shots in game 1 against the Capitals, he will be the guy who needs to step up and make the key saves that they need to, and kept the Hurricanes in the game, and that's what exactly happened, and that's why you now see the fact that the Hurricanes came in, stole that game because they didn't lead at all in game 1. They tied it pretty much in the third period and then won it on the Jaccob Slavin overtime winner. So the Hurricanes went into game 1 knowing that it was going to be a very loud crowd in DC. The Capitals are the number 1 seed in the East. They're a team that really played well all season, which surprised a lot of people. But you got to give stick taps to them for having a season that well exceeded a lot of expectations. But the Hurricanes went in, did their job, and on the back of Andersen just playing some phenomenal defense, and the Hurricanes sticking to their game, out shooting, out hitting, doing all the things that what really needed to help the Canes win. They got that win, and that's because Andersen also helped contribute to making the key saves when they needed to, kept them in the game. That's why they eventually were able to tie it and then win it. So you got to give flowers to Andersen for that performance. And, just so far in the play, I mean, this is his first one after getting his contract extension, and goes to show why the Hurricanes are bringing him back, because when you have a goals against under 1.5 and a save percentage over 930, that goes a long way. So the fact that you got him for next season at $2.75 million with $750,000 in possible performance bonuses, that is a huge deal for the Hurricanes. And the way Andersen's been playing so far in these playoffs, this contract that he's got for 25-26 just keeps looking better and better. And you love to see it from the Great Dane for how he's been playing. And, Thursday is going to be very interesting for how that's going to go. I would not be surprised if the Hurricanes go back to Andersen again, because he's just been that dialed in. So it should be fun. And that's going to be a really fun preview episode for Thursday to talk about Frederik Andersen and how he's going to be huge for them once again, if that is the case. Now in the postgame, what did the head coach of the Hurricanes think about his team's performance? Well, stick around. We'll listen to that and give my thoughts on Rod's postgame comments here in a second on a Wednesday edition of Locked on Hurricanes.
An award-winning mattress can change your life. I speak from experience. It happened to me. After years of uncomfortable sleeps, I recently switched to Bear Mattress, and the results were instant. Bear Mattress is designed with a focus on recovery, cooling, and pressure relief to upgrade your sleep and improve your overall quality of life. I used to deal with night sweats, but Bear's best-in-class cooling ensures optimal temperature regulation, which prevents overheating and helps me stay comfortable all night long. Bear offers a wide variety of mattresses, but to get the right one for you, take their sleep quiz that matches you to your perfect mattress based on body type and sleep preferences. Go to bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout to get 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com. Use my promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked on Hurricanes, your team every day. So like I said, we're going to jump into the post-game press conference to get Rod Brind'Amour's thoughts on his team's 2-1 overtime win in Game 1. So without further ado, let's jump into that right now.
Rod, I imagine you like to preach the process and sticking to the plan. Is this a perfect example of getting rewarded for doing things the way you guys want to do it?
Well, I thought our guys played hard every shift, right from the start of the game, and I liked how we were playing. Obviously, we were down, but yeah, I mean, there's a certain game plan. Both teams have it. I thought we were on it tonight. Sometimes you don't get rewarded, but tonight we did.
Rod, over here, just even on Jacob's winning goal, I don't know if you expect that shot to go, but just the way the process there as far as having the traffic, is that kind of...
Well, he's open, so he's not going to not shoot it. I mean, that's kind of the thought behind it, and we got some traffic, and I mean, you got to give. I don't know how many shot blocks they had, but they had a lot of blocks tonight. That's why they're a good team. They're one of the best because they're willing to do that, and you have to know that going in, and you have to also not be deterred by that, and you just got to keep putting it there, because they're not giving you much of anything else. So, obviously, it wasn't the greatest of goals, but they all count.
You mentioned not getting deterred when pucks are getting blocked. Thompson seems to be rolling. What's the mood on the bench? What is being said to kind of keep things snowballing in that direction?
Not much. It's a little different if I think they're up by a couple. I think when the game's just still that one shot away, it makes it a little easier to stick with the process there. But so we were able to at least keep it to one, and so you're in the game. You just got to stay with it, and we were able to get the one turnover and a nice goal by Stanks, and then now you just stick with what we're doing and trying to find that the next one.
Big thank you to Rod Brind'Amour of the Carolina Hurricanes, as always. And you kind of heard from the head coach himself when you look at, sticking to the process, sticking to what works. And, he even mentioned about the Capitals and a lot of block shots and not being deterred from that. You're throwing pucks on net, you're trying to throw shots on it, and they're blocking. Like I said, they had over 30 blocks in this game. But the fact that the Hurricanes kept going and kept going, that's why you saw them have 94 shot attempts. That's why they had 33 shots go on net while having 32 of them blocked. They were just high volume, green light go. Like there wasn't a lot of just, you see some games where the Hurricanes are just, doing a little bit too much extra passing or stuff like that. The Hurricanes got the puck, throw it on net, see what happens. Because, like for Jaccob Slavin's goal, if you put the puck on net, good things happen. And that's what Rod was talking about, for the fact that, they're blocking the shots. And, he gave credit to the Capitals. That's why they're one of the best teams in the league, because they threw their body in front of the puck. That's why, they won a lot of games, because they were able to stop the other team from putting the puck on the net, and they were blocking shots. But that's why the Hurricanes, even with Jaccob Slavin's goal, hey, put it on, see what happens. And luckily there was traffic, puck got past everyone and went into the net. There you go. There's your game winner. But even for the fact that you hear from Walt Ruff asking, what's the mood on the bench? And it's just, what do you say there? And it's, and I love Rod's answer is like, you don't really say much. There's really no difference unless, you're winning the game. then you're looking at a different, like, you're looking at maybe a different strategy a little bit. But just for the fact that it was just, hey, keep doing what you're doing, keep shooting the puck, keep doing what play your game. And they did it because you get the turnover. Logan Stankoven scores in the third. You finally break, you finally break it to tie the game, and then you go into overtime and you're just out shooting the Caps. Like the Hurricanes basically outshot them pretty much every period. How about 12-5 in the first, 8-6 in the second, 11-3 in the third, and the Hurricanes 2-0 in overtime. Hurricanes didn't even give the Capitals a chance to put a shot on the net, and the Hurricanes had two. It's just that just keep shooting and just, eventually something is going to go in, even if the goalie is playing very hot. It's going to take one of those seeing eye shots that are going to go in, and that's what happened. That's how you got Jaccob Slavin scoring a goal from the point, is the fact that you had the traffic and was able to get by him. So I like the fact that you hear from Mongo, and it's like, yeah, there's no real, there's no, what can you really say to a team who's, playing a physical game and just out shooting, out chancing the other team all game? It's just, hey, you just keep doing what you're doing. Don't get timid. Don't look for the extra pass just to make the extra pass. It's just, if you're open, you got a lane, shoot it. Let's just see what happens. And that's why you see the Hurricanes do what they did. And that's why you see them now up 1-0 in the series. And it's, it's one of those things where the pressure is a little bit on the Capitals, because the last thing, like I said, Washington wants is to be down 2-0 going back to Carolina. So that game 2 is going to be very crucial for them just to get the split. But at least the Hurricanes, we always hear about the cliche of, the series hasn't really started unless you won on the road. And you kind of heard it from the ESPN broadcast last night of talking about, the Hurricanes, they kind of struggle winning on the road. They struggle on the power play, but power play was, they had a really good power play, 31% in the first round. They won game 4 in New Jersey. Now you go into this one, and hey, Hurricanes, they're controlling the series now because they won on the road. Now it matters because they won the road game. And the fact that you did it in game 1 is now you're kind of putting the pressure on Washington, because now it's not, you're having to fight back if you're Carolina in game 2 to tie the series up without you being down 2-0. Now you are in control of the tempo of the series, and now it's where's Washington going to come back and do their thing in game 2, and then the Hurricanes are going to have to find a way to defend that. But if they play the same way they did in game 1, where I don't know if they're going to out hit Washington, but I think they know that, okay, we can definitely play our game and stick to what we can do best, and be able to control them to an extent, and find a way to stay in the game. So I think that's going to be a very big help for the Canes, the fact that out hitting, out chancing, sticking to your game. You limited the Capitals on their power play opportunities. You only gave them 2, and now you're 17 for 17 in the playoffs, and now you're 2 for 2 in the series so far. So I think in all facets of the game, the Hurricanes, even while being down for the most part for some of the game, they still found a way to stick to it. And that's why I think that's why you hear Rod saying, hey, stuck to the game plan, just keep shooting. Don't let their block shots affect you. And I think that's what kind of helped them out, and why you saw so many chances for the Hurricanes, because they were just willing to play that 200-foot, really strong forward check, transitional game, not get burned by a lot of plays. And that's why they stuck to it so good. And that's why you saw Frederik Andersen making the saves that he needed to, even was to just 14 shots. But this was an overall Hurricanes game where they will high volume shoot you to death and find a way to play their structured defensive game and let their transition play work and just be able to grind you down. And that's what happened. And that's how you got the Hurricanes essentially stealing game 1 in Washington. And now you go into Thursday going, hey, if the Hurricanes win, now you're up 2-0. Even if you go back to Carolina tied 1-1, you got that necessary road win to change the dynamic of the series. So game 2 should be very interesting. But what an overall game 1 for the Hurricanes. Got the win, got it overtime off a Jaccob Slavin goal. Like I said, the second C stands for clutch. You love to see it. Freddie played a great game as always. Now that's his, third full game, only giving up 1 goal so far these playoffs, and I'm very excited to see what he can do in game 2 if he is the starter, and just how to see the Canes play overall in that one. Of course, that'll be a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, but it should be very, very fun to see how that plays out. But what a Game 1 performance for the Canes. And now they are 1-0 in the series. Guys, that will be a Wednesday episode of Locked On Hurricanes State. First listen. Check out Locked On every game, every night until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or as the podcast. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at @1ChooZach on X. The podcast is @LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky, the Zachary Martin, where you can check out all my articles at thehockeywriters.com. Also, if you want to check out my other podcasts, it's the Surgecast and all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For this show, well, it's on Google, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to the podcast. Follow, subscribe, leave a 5-star rating or review because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, well, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss a show. Hit the thumbs up to let me know if you liked the show as well. Share with all your kids to become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Wednesday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.